Are we still calling this normal adult human? Or is this some new thing?
Super adult.
What?
Super adult.
Super adult human.
Yeah.
Uber adult human.
Extremely adult.
Extreme adult. I think that we're going to wind up on some lists if we call it extreme adult.
That is true. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was actually
The extremists. People were like, we didn't know what that meant. I'm so sorry.
Officially,
we thought it just meant really cool.
Yeah, like radical.
Yeah.
How like Bart Simpson would say it? Extreme.
Did you guys ever wonder, like, you know how you guys have the Freedom of Information Act? Did you ever want to go and check if, like, the FBI or anybody has a file on you?
I feel like
you can do an FBI request. I've always been interested in seeing that.
Yeah, but
I think that if you,
I was told actually that okay, for people who aren't aware who I am, actually, in fact, everybody, I'm the graphic designer, creative director for Strike Gently Co. Charlie and I have been working together for the last a good part of the last 10 years. Correct me, Charlie, if I'm wrong on that. And I'm from Serbia, so I am way distance from most of the topics at hand. So this is just like a little bit intro into who I am before I start talking about the Freedom of Information Act. The reason why I'm saying this is because a friend of mine, she's from the US, and she says that anybody can actually access it on my behalf. For instance, you could access the FBI and see if I have a record. And if I do not have one, I'm going to get one started immediately, because why in the hell are you asking if you have a file if you actually don't? That means you should have one. So I was super curious if, like, people from the United States just like are prone to finding out if there's any dirt on it.
I think that the moment you request the file, if there's not a file on you, they start one on you.
Exactly.
It's like, they're like, red flag number 1.
Yeah, catch 22.
Yeah, why is this guy requesting to see his FBI file from a VPN that says he's in Indonesia?
Sounds legit.
Yeah, so we're doing this again with guests. We have Nemanja as our first guest. The kind of gist of it, which we are not telling the guests beforehand, is we're kind of just loosely going to be exploring the life journeys, I guess, of interesting people. Is that kind of what we could say, Morgan? Like the most interesting people that we know?
Well, I mean, it's not always going to be people we know, but Nemanja we happen to know.
Or that we want to know, that we reach out to.
And it's not just that's like a part of it. I'm really curious to figure out how people wind up where they are. And
point A to B.
Yeah, like it's never a straight line, but I find, at least with myself, when I look at things in hindsight, everything seems to make sense. Like everything seems to logically follow. Like there's no other career I could have right now other than doing what I do for myself. So, and for me, when I look at all the other careers and jobs that I had in the past, it all was leading to this inevitably in my mind, not like a fate way, but in like a, I don't know.
Causality.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, was it the difference with determination and predetermination? Everything you did led to this.
Exactly. I don't think that it's predetermination. Like, I don't think that I still believe in the freedom of choice. I believe that people have that, but
my bad then. I mistranslated it from my from the way I understand it as it learned it. Since I studied philosophy, there's determinism, which is exactly where you have zero choice, and predeterminism dictates causality. For instance, the butterfly effect. Imagine that on a small scale within your life. So
It's me
predetermined.
that's made the mistake, not you. You know what you're talking about. Something you're going to discover during the course of this podcast, Nemanja, is that you're a much smarter person than Charlie or I. But
That was the
especially,
biggest that was the biggest reason I was interested in having you on first, is because like you, whenever we talk, which is probably every couple weeks, I'd say we have a very like airtight kind of workflow at this point that like doesn't require a whole lot of deliberating. And Nemanja is just good at his job, so I don't really have ever that much feedback except for positive feedback. So, but when I talk to you, I get these little, every time I feel like we end up on some tangent or I get some sort of little new piece that I can add into the puzzle of trying to like, you know, fully understand you. And the it's always something interesting, like some sort of philosophical thing, or like a snippet about your life in the past or in the present. And it's like there's so many things that, even down to the other day, I was thinking about, oh, how weird it would be to be thinking about having friends who are in, like, in the Ukraine. I don't want to get into all that obviously on the podcast, but like you
By
have
all means.
this life experience in the present and in the past. It's like very interesting and unique compared to anyone that I've known. And then yeah, and then on top of that, as Morgan said, you're probably smarter than both of us. So I think that would be a
Uh,
good we could both benefit from, you know.
I will beg to differ. I'll beg to differ on regards of me being smarter. I would only, if anything, I wouldn't say that there is any hierarchical difference in quote unquote knowledge, but the only difference is difference. You guys grew up in different culture than I did, and the differentiation between you and me is the same from the perspectivist point of view. What you feel is unique about me, I feel is unique about you guys. And the things that you could talk about, like for instance, I'm going to give you a very simple example. Like, you have no idea how stumped I was when I first heard of the term caked up. It
Caked up.
took me so long to figure out what caked up means. For you guys, you probably know about this for the last God knows how long that was up. I had to sit through the internet. Like, I had to go to the unsavory tavern of the internet, 4chan, and find
isn't
out
that
what
the
this
whole internet?
is. It
Sorry,
what?
isn't that the whole internet?
Well, yeah, it is, but there's only so many places where I as like a Serbian person, random Serbian peasant, let me correct myself, can go and find out stuff without actually having to engage with people and ask them direct questions like, what does caked up mean? And I found out eventually. So the thing is, like, I can't actually call myself or claim to be smarter than anybody else if I can't even understand the vernacular of most of the terms that you guys use on a regular basis.
Well, let's put it this way. Nemanja, how many languages do you speak?
I'm gonna say two and a quarter.
Two and a
Two and
quarter. Okay.
two and two quarters, actually. I swear very well in Hungarian. Um, I'm I can understand Russian. I can communicate with Russians easily. I speak, I'm going to say, good English, and I'm fluent in Serbian. So,
That's a lot more than two and a half.
well, depends. A Russian person will probably blow me out of the water, and I simply cannot master Hungarian, and I've been trying for most of my life. It's the most difficult language to learn, and I'm willing to bet my last dime on it.
Now, did you absorb these languages from the skulls of the men you killed that are sitting behind you?
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that to become a subject. No, I have not. Though those were nice people that were left.
They were nice people. They asked the wrong questions.
I was gonna say, they didn't do anything wrong. They just got in my way. Not just, no. They're actually, and this is the cultural differences that I was talking about. Like, those bones that you can see here are actually heirlooms. I've gotten from my no, not great, my grandfather, and since that's a long story in itself. I don't know if I want to bother people with that, but those have been in my family for the last 3 generations, and I'm the current bone keeper of the family.
Wow.
It's fantastic.
There's no bone keeper in my family.
What?
There's no bone keeper in my family.
No bones about it.
That I'm aware of.
Well, you can start it. Like
There may be a secret bone keeper.
Yeah, your wife just has like multiple, like a whole catacomb under the house. Honey, what is this?
Karen?
What are you up to?
Ask me no questions and I'll tell you no lies.
Yeah, no judgment. Just wondering.
Just curious.
Well, I mean, I kind of want to hear about it, but if you want to share.
No, it's not exactly.
Are they your ancestors?
Oh no! They're literally. Well, I'll give you the abbreviated version. The thing was, my grandfather. He was I'm going to say an esteemed foreman, construction, something in between a construction foreman and an architect. And he was working back in the 60s in former communist Yugoslavia, building factories. And as you all probably know, at the peak of communism, communism could not go wrong. So whenever they would come across a wild graveyard, that would imply graves of paupers, people who couldn't pay for a proper burial, etc. Mass graves for one of the hundreds of wars that have been fought on this corner of the earth. And whenever they would dig up one of these graves, the higher ups would always say, just like throw them in a dumpster, throw them away, because it was always implied that they were either undesirables, enemies of the state, in the sense Austro-Hungarians, Germans, people who fought through history, Bulgarians, Turks. Yeah, we had wars with every single neighboring country except Romania. We're good with Romania, sort of. Anyway, so my grandfather literally felt bad about treating them as like waste, so he collected them, and most of them got like passed on to other parts of the family, etc. But these are the ones that are in my possession. This is the part that's in my possession. And since we don't know if they're Muslim Turks, if we don't know if they're Austro-Hungarian Catholic, we don't know if they're Bulgarian Orthodox, we know nothing about them. So the initial idea was to have them repatriated or have them buried along with the proper religious ceremony that would be required for them. But if they're not what we presume that they are, then that would be a huge disservice to them. So then
you're sending a soul to purgatory for like 15,000 years if you get that wrong, right?
And that's exactly what somebody told me, and I said, better purgatory than hell.
Maybe they just go straight to hell. I don't know a whole lot about those particular traditions. So,
in all honesty, like the part of the Balkans where I'm from is a melting pot. So there is literally not one person, the type of person I know of, that is like just Serbian, just Croatian, just this, just that. Like I'm from a mixed marriage of a Hungarian mother who is of Austro-Hungarian descent, and my father was Serbian. So I was also like, I'm one of the types of the mixes that come about in the north of Serbia, and that's one of the reasons why we can't actually pinpoint who and what these people were. The only thing that we could positively identify was due to the decay and the grinding of the teeth, was that they were over 200 years old and they were most probably paupers. One had very bad osteoporosis on his spine. changes to the forehead that was first was thought to be syphilis, but then syphilis didn't came here by that time, so it was most probably a very advanced case of osteoporosis, etc., etc. I could go on, but we were able to find nothing concrete about who they were. So in the meantime, while I figure out what's the best course of action, the best advice I was given to treat them as I would like my bones to be treated. And I figured this is being venerated and talked about across the entire ocean is much better than being worm food. And I'm willing for my own skull to have a pedestal in somebody's room than be, tossed in the trash of a communist country.
If these fellas could have seen the podcast they were on, I think they'd be pretty impressed.
I'm sure they would. Yeah, they would. I mean, I don't know. I was actually wondering how they react if they could somehow perceive this version of the future. I think they would be.
If you had to explain to them what caked up means.
Yeah, that'd be kind of difficult. But
that like what you were saying made me. Oh, sorry. What were you going to say?
I was just gonna say that would make one hell of a TikTok video.
Yeah. We once they invent time travel, there's all these like TikTok teens that go back and they're like, we went to the Neolithic era and showed them videos of Ice Spice. While you were talking, it made me think, because it just was making me think about how different some of our life experiences are, of course, and what you were saying earlier about the intrigue that I get from listening to you talk about things is similar to the intrigue you get from listening to us talk about things because of those differences. Yeah. And then I'm thinking, like, you were talking briefly about your mom and dad and stuff, and I was thinking, like, one of the topics that we have that we want to like loosely touch on potentially with people is just called origin story. And then that made me think to ask, maybe it's a more interesting thing to say, could you describe what your life was like when it was the most different from now than it's ever been? Well, maybe that's when you're 4 years old, your earliest memories. Maybe that's when you're like when you had your crazy health thing happen. Like that could mean different things to different people. So Morgan, do you think that's like an interesting way to hit that one?
Sure. I mean, the way we were thinking about it was like, is there one event that you can pinpoint in your life that has led you to where you are today? Like, was there
that's a good place. Yeah.
For you.
How do I do that question justice? I don't know. Well, as far as like the origin story, nothing too spectacular, nothing too out of the ordinary for this part of the world. In fact, I often get quoted in Serbian podcasts and media when I say that when we were growing up, we'd have everything we needed, but nothing we wanted, and that's not, that's very common for literally everybody who grew up in this part of the world. Note, I was born in 1989. The communist Yugoslavia, it disbanded, it crashed into flames in the early 90s. So for the first, I'm going to say, decade of my life, culminating with the Kosovo conflict, well, that's a whole another question. But the first 10 years of my life was kind of in a fog of war, as you would say. But as a kid, I didn't know any better. But like, here's a good example. When you go to a store and you want to buy a candy bar, yes. you can pick a Twix, a Snickers, I don't know, a Kit Kat, and this and that. When we would go to the store, you had one chocolate bar, one ice cream, and just one of everything. So if you wanted a chocolate, you have the chocolate, and that's it. And there's nothing else. And as we were growing up, and I'm thinking 1996, we got satellite dishes, so we could pick up like Cartoon Network and stuff like that. And that's one of the reasons why I managed to speak English, is because I picked up from cartoons. And then you would see how kids in the US had all these toys, had all these sweets and stuff, and we were like this is a fairy tale. This is part of the program. That this cannot be true. This is like opulence in such a level that we couldn't fathom. Then after all the conflicts ended, once the economy opened up, once I won't say we stopped being poor per se, but once we managed to carve our own little part of life, get some of our own money, then we had that, as Morgan pointed out, that one moment where the world sort of like opened up to us, and that inevitably changed you. There's a very good quote, like there's a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes. He says, once a mind is stretched to a new idea, it never retracts to its original dimension. I think I'm paraphrasing, maybe not verbatim, but you get it. And the first time when I got any money and I had a chance to travel, to experience a wider chunk of the world, I realized how, in fact, we were enclosed in this, I want to say bubble, but I'm more inclined to say like a veil of willful ignorance. And my tipping point into not being okay with that was, as you mentioned, Charlie, back when I was back in 2010. I was just about to turn 21. Back then, I had aspirations of becoming an MMA fighter, and I had my first pro fight lined up. And in the camp for the fight, my spleen ruptured. Being blockhead that I am, I refused to go to the doctor, which eventually led to me having major internal bleeding, which led to a very serious surgery during which my heart stopped. I got reanimated, after which no doctor would ever give me a license to fight or compete. And that was the point where, okay, I did what I wanted to do. I died because of it. They brought me back, so I'm on borrowed time. So I might as well have a good time while I'm at it, you know. And that, I think, I would place as the tipping point to where I was no longer content with being a casualty of a situation in which I was born against my will, and then trying my best to carve out a future as best as I could. And this all sounds like a meticulously made plan, but as we mentioned before we started filming, this isn't a marathon per se. This is teamwork. This is nobody gets anywhere in life on their own. I had a lot of help from everybody. Charlie in particular. Like, if Charlie never entered my life would have been way worse than it is. And he knows this. We speak about this a lot, especially when I compare my life now to my friends who I could say live a comfortable life by Serbian standards, but they're nowhere near as, I'm gonna say, fulfilled as mine. This sounds rude to them, and I honestly feel a little bit guilty whenever I talk about it. But now I have a chance to travel, to do all the 13-year-old things I always wanted to do, but never even realized I could. But now I do. I get to travel the world. I get to want stuff and get them. You know, it sounds silly, but it was something that was denied for every child growing up from late 80s or early 90s all the way to the 2000s.
That must be such a trip to be like, to have that sort of cultural, I mean, you can call it culture, but like to have the machine of media exposed to you when you're already, like, Charlie and I grew up with all of that type of, like, the onslaught of cartoons and like you were saying, like, just like never ending, like a plethora, what you call the opulence of it, that was all around us growing up. For me in Canada, and for Charlie in the States, it was not unusual to us. And for you to have it be a point, like, come at you in such a way that it seemed almost like mythological, like it was like not, it had to be made up. Like it's like,
Yeah.
no, this has got to be false. And then to have that happen to you when you were 10, you were saying, like, that was, you were 10 years old when you
Ever since I remember, the first memory I have of myself was, I believe, 5 or 6 years old when I can actually remember myself. All the way up to until I was like 13, I honestly believe that most of the things we saw on Cartoon Network, Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, etc., whichever channel we could get at the time, I honestly thought that most of the commercials showing like these happy kids playing with Nerf guns and Dinobots and stuff like that, that must be part of the promo for the cartoons, because we never saw anything like that in our
yeah.
stories, and you could never get those stories.
You mentioned also travel being like something that, I mean, I know that it's an important part of your life from just seeing kind of your adventures on Instagram and how there's almost a reverence that you seem to talk about the places that you visit. How do you like approach, like if you're going to a brand new country, how do you prepare yourself to engage with the different cultures you're going to be surrounded by? And yeah, I guess, like, do you do your homework ahead of time, or are you going in blind?
Um, the correct answer would be both. You know, you can only prepare so much. And it also depends where you're going. Like if you're going to a capital city, you can do some preparation, accurate preparation, where you're going to go, what you're going to do, etc. But if you go a little bit off the beaten track, or, for instance, we like exploring abandoned buildings and nuclear bunkers, and for instance, Chernobyl. You can never prepare yourself for visiting Chernobyl. And in that sense, the more I travel, the more I prefer to go in it, as you said, blind. Like I trust my intuition more, because if I plan, I start to get certain expectations which are unfounded. I cannot presume what it's going to be like anywhere else in the world but here. And whenever I go there, all of my presuppositions go out the window, and then I just get floored with whatever I see there. And that happens to me every time. The culture shock moment, actually, you can never prepare for that. No matter where you go, no matter how much you've studied the culture, it's always going to blow your mind out.
Out of everybody that I've seen, sort of, you're definitely the most well-traveled person that I know.
Really?
And for sure. I mean, as far as like the most kind of the diversity of far-flung places that you've gone to, I know a lot of people that have been to like a lot of Western Europe and a lot of Eastern Asia, and maybe a couple places in Africa, but like you're going deep into the Amazon, you're going to like abandoned villages, you're going to places that people, when they think about traveling, are not high on their list usually.
Yeah, there's a sort of this goes back to the difference that what you're like the experience that you've had too. It seems like, where from our perspective, traveling for myself and probably everyone in my life was always about a sort of comfort, a vacation type escape, maybe a relaxation, a certain expectation as you're talking about, but an expectation that you know would be met with kind of a level of like homogeneity and comfort and luxury. And like, oh, I'm gonna go, you know, like my family would be like, oh, we're gonna go stay at a very similar place kind of near the beach. We're gonna get a nice, you know, like a meal, like a cheeseburger or some seafood. We're gonna have, you know, like a sort of prototypical American vacation experience, precisely because like that's what we're kind of taught to desire. And I am not a very adventurous traveler now. I tend to, like, when I do go places, it tends to be almost like sometimes feels like the same place in different parts of the world, where you know what to expect from the nice restaurant or the hotel or this and that. but you have like this adventurousness about the ability to not have those expectations, and then to be, I would imagine at times, in rather bizarre circumstances or situations, based on what I've heard about your Amazon travels and the weird shit that you find when you go into the Siberian wilderness. Uh, you know.
A lot of those things. Lots of well, don't get me wrong. Like we can differentiate a vacation from an adventure per se. And don't get me wrong, I love vacationing. There's very few things I like more than camping next to the sea. You know, so I'm not I'm never gonna knock that because I really love that. In fact, there's a 5-star hotel in the mountain in the south of Serbia that's invited me to be like their guest in a 5-star hotel. I've never been in a 5-star hotel, so I'm not against it. Like, okay, wine and dine me and show me the sauna and the pool and everything. I'm down.
We'll
But there's
we'll contextualize this for listeners who don't know Nemanja by saying that like Nemanja has become, and because he wouldn't like brag about this himself, but from what I understand, as a non-Serbian, you've become a bit of a regional celebrity in Serbia due to your social media presence and your TikToks and your travels. And so you've been on like a bunch of news interview programs, and um yeah, you're, I mean, that's amazing that you're now getting like travel vlogger type offers to go
yeah,
places.
I was I was blown away. I've pinpointed on a term that I'm comfortable with: internet niche micro celebrity. So that's I'm comfortable with.
It's
Anything
good. It's a
above
good
that,
life, right?
it's as much exposure as I'm willing to receive. At the same time, that's the maximum amount of responsibility I'm willing to take upon myself. For instance, if anybody deems me an adventurer, I shrug. If anybody deems me an influencer, I shrug. But like, call me a niche internet micro celebrity, that's so aloof. I love it. I'll take that up any day. And yeah, when a friend of mine, Joe, when he invited me over to go to the Amazon, I was like, well, that's not a bad place to die. I might as well go. And here I am, and I'm gonna go again to the Amazon with the Matisse tribe for the third time in 3 years. So,
You going back with the same tribe that you visited twice before? Is that what you're saying?
well, I've visited other tribes as well: Kokama, Hoitota, Tikuna, Ikuna, Hoitota. I'm gonna like, the list is quite big because Colombia, Brazil, and Peru have a lot of Amazonian tribes that have been contacted, but the Matisse tribe have been contacted for the first time in 1976. And they have this, they kind of shrug away from Western civilization. They abhor alcohol. They're not much into technology. They like sugar and they like machetes. Metal pots and pans, okay, and washed up shorts and t-shirts, okay, but that's about it. And that's where the line is drawn. They're very much, I won't say an untouched, uncommunicated tribe, but that's the only type of tribe that's as closest to I can get without having my head caved in and probably boiled alive. Not to give him flack, but there are several tribes within the vicinity. I forgot the name of that one. It's a cannibalistic society. Now, when I say a cannibalistic society, I'm not saying that as a derogatory description. Their culture is different. They practice every form of cannibalism, auto cannibalism as part of reverence, during war as a means to sustain themselves, etc. And if I happen to wander into one of their camps, I would be, well, I hope I would be tasty, but that's about it. So the safest way I could go to the Amazon and get in touch with an uncontacted tribe is the Matisse tribe, as far as it is for me. And they don't want to meet with just about anyone. A lot of strings have been pulled for us to meet them, and it really is like when we talk culture shock, like my moral compass was spinning like a stopwatch all the time while I was there, just because the culture is so vastly different, so vastly different. And this is one of the things, and it doesn't need to be that different from my own culture. Russia, for instance, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, um, Japan. Oh my God, Japan! I literally felt like I was an imposter in that country. You know, but there's so much I didn't know about it. I had the need to leave because I felt I was ruining the harmony of this perfectly created country just by being there. Like a strain of Harians had a perfectly created Rolex watch. I didn't know on which side of the street to walk. With how many hands do I accept the money? Do I greet the greeter? Do I greet him on the way out? It was so complex and confusing. And then I realized just how in a positive way, my own culture is supremely insignificant because every culture on a global scale is effectively insignificant in comparison to everyone else's. And
Right.
it's, yeah, and we all tend, this is not something we can influence, but we can't, we project our own culture on other cultures. And when you do that, you get horribly disappointed. You get, how do I say? I won't say you get your soul twisted in knots by judging other people, but if you persevere through that and visit several cultures during your lifetime, you realize that everybody's, as much as everybody's the same, that's how much they're different. And to come back to what Charlie mentioned, that's what actually that's what kind of got me on other people's radar, which is funny enough. Nobody actually noticed my art, my work, until I started traveling. Now I'm a commodity per se, you know, but everybody wants my work because now I'm a traveler.
Well,
You know,
you're like a niche internet micro celebrity in like four different ways concurrently, individually from one another at the same time. Where like you're known for the artwork that you do for us, you're known for the traveling in Serbia, you're known for all this shit. It was really hard calling. I had to call State Farm and be like, what happens if my right hand man gets eaten? You know, can I file a claim on that? How does that work?
well,
And they were like, excuse me?
Yeah. They were like, could be
well,
us.
I wouldn't. I don't know how to answer that. Honestly, I'm sorry I have to put you in that sort of a predicament.
Yeah.
I didn't actually have to do that. I was just joking.
Uh,
Thankfully.
Charlie already has a really comprehensive cannibalism policy, so
There's everything's covered. Yeah.
um, I'm wondering if whenever I travel anywhere abroad, I pay for insurance. I wonder if there is any stipulation if I get killed and eaten by cannibals in the Amazon, but I highly doubt it.
I've got a fun childhood story to contrast your childhood stories from living in a hyper capitalist wasteland that is highly privileged but also highly deranged in its own way.
You
In middle
downplay.
school, what was
Sorry,
that?
sorry to interrupt you. You can downplay it all you want, but I'm already envious of your childhood.
In middle school, at some point, some insurance company convinced the school to distribute pamphlets for what I guess was basically child insurance to all of the children at the school to give to their parents in hopes that the parents would buy policies on their children while they were at school. It was some type of like child at school insurance. This is a real thing. So I remember in like the fifth grade getting a pamphlet, and the pamphlet would effectively outline the various claim amounts and coverage values for different types of accidents and horrible things that could happen to a child. So there'd be like you'd be reading through this. And it's like you can imagine like as a five
That's
like as
cool.
an 8-year-old boy, and you're reading through, and it's like one leg plus one arm plus blindness, $125,000 or something. There's just
Well,
this laundry list of like 75 different things like that,
well, wow.
Got to
which is
quantify it all somehow.
bizarre.
That's a lot of money.
I feel like they probably don't do that anymore. Yeah. You're like, wow. Yeah, everyone in post-war Serbia would have just been cutting their arms off and fucking gouging their eyes out.
Well, without their own, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who would have had insurance on their lives without them knowing, and all of a sudden they would wake up and missing some spare parts. Let's say that.
When you, I mean, so you touched on this briefly when you were talking about traveling, but it seems like you have it doesn't seem, you definitely do have a very sort of open mind when it comes to your traveling. And I think it's necessary to do that or to have that when you travel to the vast number of places that you travel to. But I think also the more you travel, the more open-minded you inevitably become, unless you're a complete idiot. I don't think you are.
Well, I will every word you said I can sign it as it was my own, except for the part of me possibly being an idiot. I cannot vouch for that being the fact. I most probably am, but I'm doing my best to fake it. Kidding, of course. Yeah, no, the more you travel, the more you realize, as I said, we're vastly different, but we're also very much the same. I'll give you a very simple example of that just in a second. But like when I was in Azerbaijan and Armenia, that was just before the recent conflict over, because they have disputed territory in between them, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the tensions escalated. There was a war that erupted several months ago. All in all, they say you can't go from Armenia to Azerbaijan, so you have to go to Georgia and then enter Azerbaijan. And the thing is, when we did that, we jumped through all the hoops to visit all three countries actually, and we remember thinking like, they're all literally the same. Like they're the same type of people. Like this is like a brother being very angry with his own brother, and it's like kind of we were thinking how asinine it is, and then we come back to Serbia and realize, wait, that's the exact same thing that happened to Yugoslavia. Like this, the house divided situation. Like it's a brother against a brother, and we're basically the same people. And that's what happened to Yugoslavia. That's happening in Armenia. That's happening now in Ukraine and Russia. It's brother against brother, as we tend to say it here. And how do I phrase this? You see, and we're vastly different from them, us Serbs, from them Armenians and Azerbaijani, Azeri. And now, when I look back upon it, like I see the differences are so vast and the similarities are equally as vast that I can't help but see a lot of us in them. And a very good example, the pinnacle of all examples, was when I met the chief of the Matisse tribe. Now, keep in mind, the Matisse are very short people. They're, I don't know, in imperial units, freedom units, sorry.
Yeah, how many French fries tall are these little guys? Can you quantify that for me?
No, freedom fries. You guys don't have French fries anymore, Charlie.
Pardon me.
So wait, I'm 6'2", so that's 188 centimeters. So if I have my calculations done correctly, they're somewhere between short and very short.
You can say it in centimeters. That's fine. I'm Canadian. I'll understand.
Okay, so they're about 155 centimeters. The men,
Yeah.
160 at the most. And
How many extra large Cokes is that tall in America? Sorry. Okay, I'm done. I promise.
no, Morgan, I'm gonna need your help. How many
How many
extra large?
extra McDonald's Cokes are we talking? Or are we?
Yeah, that's the standard unit from what I understand. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's the standard American unit.
So they're
So,
small. They're like what, 4 foot, 4.5 feet tall, 4 feet tall.
yeah, sounds right.
I remember the pictures you showed me. It
Yeah,
seemed like
they're
approximately like Danny
5'1".
DeVito height.
okay. This is gonna be the worst comparison ever, but like, keep in mind I'm like 6'2", and the tallest one would be like not even up to my shoulder. So
Yeah.
that's about the
5 feet
size,
is like where we're at.
the max, let's presume. And the thing is, one of the first members of the Matisse tribe I met was the chief, and the chief, he's older. He's 70 years old, though he can climb a tree in a matter of seconds. He has a, a sloth bone through his septum to resemble a jaguar canines. He has tattoos on his face. He has eyes as black as buttons. You know, he's a very scary phenomenon. I'm not going to say a scary person because he's not. He's a good person, but he's a scary phenomenon, especially to a Westerner. And as the chief, he has obviously his bodyguards, his entourage, his clique, his his bouncers, and they always carried their war clubs with them, and their war clubs resemble like wooden what's the word, pikes? No, not pikes.
Like a
Well,
mace?
hmm?
Like a
yes,
mace?
mace, but what's the word for the tool where you hit stone with
A
the
hammer?
mine? No, not a hammer, not a hammer. Like it has
Pickaxe?
pickaxe. Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm not stupid. I'm kind of panicking because I'm on air. I knew it was a pickaxe.
Hey, I speak one language poorly, so
Minecraft.
you
That's the
speak
language.
you speak two languages better than I speak my native language. So not remembering
thank,
one word isn't really a big deal.
thank you for the compliment, though I doubt. I think it would run circles around me in English if you weren't kind enough to give me the benefit of the doubt and let me
Stop
do
praising
it.
Charlie. Get back to the pickaxe.
Okay, yeah. So he had this giant wooden pickaxe made out of palo sangre that's called bloodwood. It's a very dense type of wood, and it's very heavy, and it's called bloodwood. It's entirely red, and it's their traditional war club. So he was standing behind him, and I was like, one bad gesture from me is going to result in his entourage caving my head in, and I don't know what's their cultural accepted way of me meeting him. Do I shake hands? Do I hug him? Do I what? And I knew they liked sugar, so I gave him, like, I opened a big bag of like these little Snickers, Twix, and Mars chocolates, the kinds that you guys give out during Halloween. So I opened it and offered it to him, hoping he would like take one and recognize that that's a gesture of my friendship. What he did was he took the entire bag off of me, gave it to his entourage, and just walked away. And I was like, that wasn't the plan, but I'm alive, so I'm not gonna argue at this point anymore. And they actually have a very particular way of showing dominance. They do not smile. The women smile. I'm gonna say men lower down in the hierarchy, they will smile, but the chief will never smile. Like, no matter what happens, he will not smile. It's just like they told me it's a thing, so I agreed with that. And during one of their hunting trips, we were allowed to participate. Participate in a sense, we were that way that they were carrying. Uh, we were walking. We were their water boys, basically. That's what we were. We carried their water, and we carried whatever they wanted us to carry. Since we were significantly taller than they are, whenever they would walk through somewhere, we would have to crouch down and walk through the same place. At one point, I rose up and I smacked my head on a branch, and it was very slapstick humor-esque comical, you know? And the chief just burst out laughing. And I was like, and that's the point when I realized we are so much the same. Like you can put on a facade as thick as Fort Knox, but the second I smacked my head on a branch, you could not resist by laughing, and we laughed for a solid 2 minutes, and it was hysterical. And that's it. If we have so much in common with a practically uncontacted tribe in the Amazon, it makes the world so much smaller. Like we're all so very different. The differences are insignificant, so very insignificant.
Yeah, I mean that I realize that myself the older I get, but my understanding of it is is fathoms less than your understanding of it. I feel, and like my perspective is much more as much as I've traveled. I still feel like my perspective is much more sheltered than yours is, and you're a younger person than me. You both are, but yeah, I was born.
I'm Jesus here.
What?
I'm Jesus here. 33.
I'm 40.
You're 40?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is a joke. Joe, Charlie, please tell me he's pulling my leg.
No, homeboy is 40.
I'm old as fuck, man.
I know. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that baby skin face. Not a wrinkle to be found.
Look at these wrinkles here. Come on, you
look
can't
get
these as a
33-year-old. Yeah, no, I'm gonna beat you in this wrinkle game too. No, you're not 40. And if you are 40, you owe somebody a debt of gratitude for the genetics you inherited. Like, no, I have way more crow speed than you.
I wasn't even come on. What I wanted to.
What's your secret, Morgan? What's your secret?
You gotta eat whatever you want whenever you want to. Don't sleep very much.
Yeah, bacon and banana sandwiches, from what I understand.
Bacon and banana sandwiches. A lot of anxiety, a lot of unnecessary stress. Imposter syndrome helps a lot, and general.
I hope everybody's writing this one.
Malaise of
yeah.
Kids, pay attention, kids.
This is,
and that's how you wind up like this. What I wanted to ask you was that, like, because you've done all this traveling, your perspective has changed as you've gotten older, obviously. But is there anything that you're still afraid of? Like, do you have fears anymore? After doing stuff like the things that you've done, it seems like even death may not be a fear. It may just be like a factual inevitability from your perspective.
Well, as I'm sure both of you would agree with me, the death is, of course, the proverbial part of life, and when that happens, we don't suffer. The ones who are left behind suffer because of our death, etc. So, and I can't remember which philosopher said it, but you can never actually imagine your own death. You can only imagine your death in the third perspective of somebody else. Right. So, death as an inevitability as it is, it's also an unanswerable question. So I take it as such. It's going to happen, whether it comes by me doing what I want to do, and or maybe doing something stupid, falling off of Mount Olympus, which was a very real thing, or the Stellari Cliff in Corfu, that's also a very big possibility.
Giving the tribe king the wrong candy and getting clubbed, giving him a Werther's original and getting clubbed to death.
Imagine that. Like, okay, I'm gonna ask you something now, Charlie.
He's like, I hate almond joys, you fuck.
Like, you're offering me a Snickers? That's not even a bar. That's a biscuit, motherfucker.
You get the full size? These are the Halloween ones.
Yeah, where's the family size, bitch? You're holding out on
Yeah, exactly. go to town on my corpse, drag me through the jungle. But yeah, as I was saying, like that's obvious, and inevitability, that the fear of injury, since I've had a slew of injuries, I've learned that they're inevitable, and you can bounce back from almost everything. I'm talking injury wise, not illness wise. I have had the luck of not having any illnesses during my lifetime, so I'm talking with I'm restrained in that regard. But as far as injuries go, I chalked off a lot of things, and the thing, and this is something that a lot of people have asked me. I always tell them the fear of death or getting seriously injured doesn't keep me up at night, but the social anxiety, like the fact that I have to go to the post office and have a normal, decent, adult human conversation with the person, that makes my palms sweaty. Like, interestingly enough, I had a conversation yesterday with a friend that I have looked up for years, and we met for the first time live. I mean, not over Instagram, but live for the first time. I remember walking into this establishment, and I haven't been so scared in my life, And in one of my other podcasts, I said, give me any type of wilderness, no matter what kind it is, 1,000 times over than a capital city where people might ask me questions. Yeah, and that's just like that's different. Like, you have phobias and you have fears, but anxiety, man, that's an unparalleled neuroticism that's what's going to keep me up at night.
But hey, it's going to keep you young as well. Okay, so you're good.
You think? Oh yeah.
That's
you're
a
right.
secret. Yeah. Have you always felt that way? Have you always had social anxiety, or did it develop at a certain point?
Good question. I think it diminished over time. When I was a kid, since I'm a middle child, and I thoroughly believe in the middle child syndrome. And I wouldn't call myself a train wreck. Growing up, I was a train wreck. No. I was a bag of hot garbage on fire. Yeah, that's how I describe myself as a child.
Wow.
Zero social skills, no ability to make friends, afraid of everything, including my own shadow, and that's basically how I was, because everything around me was unknown. And what's the first reaction to anything unknown is fear, and fear can manifest as anger. But if you don't feel even enough confidence to feel angry about something, then all you get left is with fear. Nowadays, social anxiety, everybody has a dose of it. I'm pretty sure nobody is not neurotic in some sense, but I'm pretty sure it's way diminished, and I would like to think that I've worked on it immensely since, and I think I've developed some social skills. You can judge me on that after we're done filming, but yeah, still to this day, like when I was a kid, I remember because I grew up near the train tracks, one of our favorite things to play was running across the tracks just as the train would pass. Like that was the game. So the fear of
good old death dodging.
That's a very good. It sounds so stupid, but you gave it such a cool name. Kids, please don't do that. It was done by a professional teenager at the time. No.
Kids aren't interested in doing that now. They only want to play the game on their iPad where they jump on top of trains.
They want to they want to do the Fortnite Martin Luther King speech. That's all they give a shit about anymore.
it's better than running across train tracks, in my opinion.
Right.
Though,
Do you feel do you feel that the social anxiety stuff that you've clearly like gotten over time, is that kind of like the most enduring manifestation of all the trauma you experienced when you were younger? Or is that like, because you strike me as someone who is generally pretty high functioning and doesn't really take things for granted and doesn't carry a weight around or a chip on your shoulder or victimize yourself. You're kind of like a very productive and gracious person. So and don't return that with any compliment that we have to take more time making people listen to us being nice to each other. But I'm saying that in the context of like, is that anxiety kind of like the biggest trauma thing that you carry probably from your difficult and unusual upbringing? Or do you find like other stuff that comes up that like relates to that?
well, so social anxiety, I think that's a common denominator between like every one of us that had a high school experience. Like there's a very insidious hierarchy within any high school, and if you're not at the top of the proverbial food chain, you're gonna feel it, and it's gonna breed social anxiety within you. So I don't think anybody's exempt from that, but I can't say it developed as a trauma within me. No, I do have, obviously we all have trauma. Um, as you know, Charlie, when I was in Ukraine earlier this year, now it's peak war zone in Ukraine, and I was 9, going on 10 years old when the wars in Yugoslavia culminated with the bombing of my hometown. And I remember the air raid sirens, and I haven't heard air raid sirens in 20 odd years. And then I went to Ukraine, and then I heard them all over again, and just like
Wow.
something clicked, and then I'm just like, oh, and then you just like, oh, okay, now I remember this. Now this is way different. Like, this is not a kid that doesn't have to go to school anymore and doesn't mind sleeping under a table or in the basement. Now this is a grown up thinking, what if I had children? What if I had a job? What if I had been mobilized to go to, you know what I mean? And then it just re-triggered something that I probably should have addressed more, for instance, in psychotherapy or maybe with my own self. So that, while not a pleasant experience, it was a very eye-opening experience, that no matter how composed or tightly wound I am, a lot of screws are still loose. And the plus side to all of that is being aware that you're never 100%. You never know yourself 100%. You only get to learn more about yourself by exposing yourself to situations that you would not normally put yourself in. I guess you'll learn a lot about yourself, and there's this term. I've not heard it a lot in our corner of the world, but like the term ego death. Like, ego doesn't stand a chance to a culture shock.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about like the Freudian super ego and id. I'm talking about the colloquial term for ego, like I am something. Then you go to another country and you're the bottom of the pecking order. And if you don't accept that, you're gonna have a bad time. And yeah, after 10, 20 experiences of that, you realize your ego is so hollow and worthless, and it's very much something you need to reevaluate and place yourself within the world as best you can and evaluate yourself thoroughly, because let me be frank, we're a collective nobody. We're a collective of nobodies. That's something very beautiful, actually. I'm not going to get into like the poetic aspect of the philosophy of being meaningless, but like, you understand mean, there's a certain beauty in the fact that we're insignificant.
Yeah, I can relate to what you're saying for sure. Do you have, I mean, like even with ego death, you seem to have a strong sense of self about who you are. And for some people that's difficult. Can you sort of like, have you always felt like yourself? Or is there a moment when you sort of came online and you're like, oh, this makes sense now? Like it all kind of fell into place.
That's a very good question.
Morgan has that moment. What was that? You know, you could say what that was for you too at the beginning
Yeah,
to
Yeah, for me,
contextualize that.
I mean, personally, like I never felt like myself until I became a father. That was like the instant, and it was instantaneous, where it all of my, not all of my social anxieties, but a lot of the stuff that I was scared of and nervous about just like sloughed off. Is that how do you say it? Slout? How do you pronounce that word? It was like shedding skin. Excuse me. It's like I finally was like, all of the preconceptions and all of the bullshit and everything else just sort of went away, and everything made a lot more sense in that moment.
I understand that. Yeah. Charlie, do you have any similar situation, perhaps, where you would say that like you realize that yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
probably when, I mean, the most recent and most intense incarnation of that was what the same thing Morgan said, was having a child and kind of shedding all of the kind of chaff of your personality that wasn't really solidified, that wasn't real, you know, that you were trying kind of the half masks that I were kind of like hanging off of my head, you know, that like I was never gonna fully put on. And then
Yeah.
the other biggest one was probably like losing a childhood best friend when I was 21 and having to just like reconcile, like going to a wake for someone at that age, like right when you're entering adulthood, and then reconciling like, holy shit, like, you know, this person that my identity's tied up with is that's the end of the road for them, you know what I mean? And like, what does the rest of the road for me look like? And then you just consider all that stuff at a time when like maybe otherwise you're partying and you're working and you're just kind of enjoying your youth, and you're not really thinking about those deeper like metaphysical death type philosophical questions about your identity. And it kind of just shakes you into a certain degree of, and I think the physical, you know, the jolt of, I'm a very experiential, physical, visual type person, sensual person, sensual sense, sexual, sensory. I'm a sensory person.
You're a
And
sexual
like
person, Charlie.
what being
Embrace
in
it.
the room, like being in the room with my wife and helping her give birth, that was the experience for me that like pushes your consciousness into this new place. And that was kind of like that. The going to the wake was another one, you know, stuff like that. It's like these memories for me.
Both of those sound very visceral. I'm going to use the word difficult,
Yeah.
even though it's like life, and it's literally the most beautiful thing and the most horrible thing, but both are very visceral, very, I'm going to say emotionally charged. Let's say it that way, because I don't want to compare the two. It's simply not right. But you said your friend was 21 when he passed away. Not to pry, just
No, you can
curious.
pry as much as you want. Yeah. Yeah.
21. That was when my accident happened, my
Oh yeah.
injury. That yeah. So um, I vaguely remember at the time, like as I said, my goal in life was to be an MMA fighter. Like that was like the only thing I wanted. It was my ticket to the world. That was the only thing I was good at. And then I go from being peak condition to being 30%, a certified 30% handicapped. You know, because when you lose an organ, you get deemed handicapped, but a fully functioning one. So you kind of receive a little bit of that stigma, and it was kind of like, okay, wait, that was a huge part of my identity, and I just lost it. And maybe that was the point where I said, okay, like that was the hand I was dealt, and that was a losing hand. Now I have another hand to play because they managed to bring me back. That's also a funny story when I mean funny, it's not funny, but it's a funny analogy now because it turned out okay. But when I was injured, I had an emergency laparotomic splenectomy, which means they open you up like a purse, and then they see what's wrong and take out all the bust pieces out. The thing is, I had such a large volume of abdominal, well, they say fluids, but it's blood. And when they drained it all, my blood pressure dropped so severely that my heart stopped. So they had to reanimate me. So that, as the story goes, I wasn't there, so I can't corroborate.
You were there, but you just weren't conscious.
Yeah, I mean, I was technically there, but God knows where I was, or you know. So the thing was, a doctor. I don't. This is secondhand information. Came up to my then girlfriend and my mom, and they were the only ones who were allowed to wait for me in the waiting room. And the doctor like goes in and pulls down his mask, and he says, "We lost him." And a pregnant pause in his words, and my mom just gets stone cold, and my girlfriend just keels over, starts crying, and she says, "But we managed to bring him back." And it was just this most horrible
Gotta love
ever.
fucking doctors, man. Like he's fucking Caruso
like
on CSI.
getting off on
Yeah.
it. It's
He
like
takes his sunglasses off and he fucking we lost him,
Yeah.
but then we got him back.
Oh, we got him back.
Yeah.
Exactly.
like a scene from Arrested Development. Right?
Yeah, wait, there's a show where that literally is what the show, in that doctor.
Actually, what you just described as a scene from Arrested Development.
Yeah, we lost him. It's like he just ran away.
Arrested Development, the three guys? No? Am I? No,
No. Anyways, it's literally like they say we lost him, and it's the guy ran away. He literally like we can't find him.
Well, maybe that was the thing, the tipping point where I said, okay, there's no more. I'll wait to do this tomorrow, because there wasn't the proverbial tomorrow. The second, that's the thing. I actually haven't left my birth country until I was 22 for the first time, and after that I was continuously traveling any time I got through entire Europe, Asia, South America, etc.
It's crazy how you literally had a past self die. Like that person that you were literally fucking died, and then you were like reborn, and you were forced to just be a different person without those dreams because you physically were no longer like allowed to attain them. It's crazy.
That is wild.
That sounds way cooler than how I see it. But like, I'm totally gonna take you off on that definition. Like, all I'm gonna say that the way I see it, I'm a 13-year-old kid with a grown-up's pay and the same dreams I had as a 13-year-old. So I'm fulfilling them now. But yeah, and then as you mentioned, your friend's wake. I don't know if and you'll enlighten me here. Do you when a close, either a family friend or a friend of the family dies, is it normal for kids to attend funerals, or is it something just like for the adults?
It depends on the family.
It depends. Yeah, I think like I mean, I think when someone young dies, it's more likely that there's going to be other young people there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when I was a kid, I didn't always go. There were a couple of funerals maybe that I didn't go to because I was too young,
Mm-hmm.
But because the kids don't know, kids are like yelling and stuff, everyone's crying and the kids like, making fart sounds or whatever.
Yeah. Where's my candy?
Yeah.
Yeah, uncle. Uncle, wake up. Wake
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Yeah, just like they don't get it,
Can't,
you know.
can't trace that.
But
Yeah.
when young, anytime I've only been to a couple events for like young people, but it's typically full of other young people because it's like that's their peer
Yeah.
group, that's like who they know.
Well, the reason why I ask is like here it's common for children to attend all funerals
Oh yeah.
of family and close friends of family, etc. And it's almost always an open casket, unless something happened which would make that way too gruesome of an affair. But you get exposed to death early on, even though you're not aware of it. But then something way more poignant happens when it gets brought to your attention. When I was in high school, and this is very this is something I actually wanted to go to psychotherapy specifically, even though I never mentioned it in any of my sessions. Was the very first girl in my life. Like this was when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. The first girl I ever held hands with, the first girl I ever kissed, ended up committing suicide during our high school years. And I remember that just messing my brain up. Like, why? Like, how? Like, when is she coming back? Like, I'm in high school. I can't figure this out. And then there's another thing where suicide carries a lot of stigma. So a lot of people didn't want to talk about it, and I, as a kid, didn't know what questions to ask, and I had a lot of questions. I wanted answers.
Yeah.
And accompanied that with like older family members dying, going to their funerals, not realizing what's going on. And I don't think I can't say I even figured it out now, like all the impacts around it, but some when I was 26, when my father died, that's when it was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like I get the impact of that, because
Yeah.
everything happens to you then, you know, and especially if you're like the male of the family, a lot of things suddenly become your responsibility, whether you want it or not. I think that was maybe that more so than my own injury 5 years before that were the tipping point where I realized, okay, I am on borrowed time, so I'm gonna make the most of it. So what would the 13-year-old me want to do? And the 13-year-old me wanted to climb Mount Olympus, and damn it, I climbed Mount Olympus. And I remember saying, if I die climbing Mount Olympus, do not grieve. I died doing what I love, and I love being stupid about stuff like this.
It's fucking badass.
This is gonna sound left field, but when you first got that satellite, what were your favorite cartoons that you watched as a child?
Oh, good question. Good question. And thank you for segueing from these morbid subjects.
There's a reason I'm asking because I have a theory, but continue.
I would love to hear it, even if my answer isn't satisfactory. I would love to hear it. We only had a certain, well, Cartoon Network just like ran all the time. The first thing I remember watching like religiously were Power Rangers, and like that was the old Power Rangers where the Black Ranger was an African American guy, the Yellow Ranger was an Asian girl, and this very tactless.
The Americanized, like, all right.
I don't want to say racist, but looking back on it now, that was so racist, and
Yeah, it
I'm
was
very
racist.
glad.
You can say it was racist.
Okay, it was so very racist, and I'm glad I didn't pick up on any of that back then when I was a kid. But that was the first thing. Second thing was Mortal Kombat, because we had it on VHS, and the first two movies, and the video game. As far as cartoons go, I'm gonna try to remember them exactly. But if you remember, There was Conan the Barbarian, the animated series. There was
My absolute favorite. God.
Yeah, Morgan
My
loves
Man.
that. That's so fun.
My
I knew you
Man.
guys would
I
get along.
Religiously every single day after school.
loved it.
So
Loved
good.
it. He-Man, of course, Masters of the Universe. Then what else? What are all of my like obsessive cartoons that I loved? Wait, well, okay, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as well. Um, well, we didn't have a lot of choices actually,
Right.
but I remember Conan and Masters of the Universe being like the thing because it portrayed something a little bit grittier than what everything else was portrayed. And I like that.
Yeah,
I
it
used to
was
draw.
sanitized, right?
Yeah, very, very well put. Very well put. Sanitized.
So this is my theory,
Okay.
is that clearly with stuff like Mortal Kombat, Conan the Barbarian, that sparked your interest in not only travel, but also your interest in MMA. And then I was
True.
gonna say that your next life, where you're traveling extensively, but also your career is cartoons. You're making you draw illustrations for a living based on this epiphany that your 13-year-old self had. I think it
Fair
all
enough.
comes back down to the satellites. Like
You
everything.
know what? You should consider being a psychotherapist. This
Yeah,
was
Morgan,
very
can
much.
you make your background Jennifer Melfi's office next time?
uh, hold on. Hold on.
Um,
I'll
yeah,
do it in
yeah.
post.
Okay, but so that's Tony Soprano's psychotherapist, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so who's gonna play Tony?
Well, you're Tony.
Well,
No, no, no,
the guest is always Tony. Yeah.
Charlie is always Polly Walnuts.
Yeah.
no. I was gonna say I was.
We keep
Of course.
recording until you flip a table over because you're so irritated. You have a
Yeah.
rage blackout.
When are you gonna flip the table, Tony? And
You call us the C word and you storm out. That's when we end the episode.
That'd be kind of hilarious. I did I did a podcast for since Charlie knows this, but I've started designing some knives, bushcraft knives, for because I love the outdoors. I camp a lot, and there's a company that I started designing some knives for, and this is also something on my bucket list.
Can you plug the
And
company? What is it called again?
Condor Tool and Knife.
CondorTK.com, folks. You can go
This
buy
is
them.
all really
right now.
organically. The chronology that we wanted is just developing completely organically, where we were like, yeah, well, it could be an opportunity to plug some stuff and reference a few pieces of media that we want people to watch.
Oh, do I have anything specific that I want to plug then?
Condor.
Well, if you want to check on my Instagram, a lot of the things that I'm saying, you can see on my Instagram. My Instagram is Nemanja with a J.
We'll put it in the
description.
video.
No,
I highly recommend anybody who enjoyed this. Nemanja's Instagram is really fantastic. It's like the highest quality Instagram maybe that I've ever seen.
That's a way over exaggeration, but
that was hyperbolic. That'll make people be like, yeah, maybe, yeah, probably not. It's a really sick Instagram. I'll say that.
It's the type of Instagram that would make somebody be a niche micro internet celebrity.
It'll also make you be like, wow, my life is not that interesting, which it regularly does to me.
I'm sorry if that's
me as well.
I am sorry twice if that's the case.
That's not apologize
sorry.
to yourself ever.
Well, be that I will never advise anybody to enter and abandon oncological a hospital. So I would like to think of it. I will do that so that you guys don't have to.
Yeah, I
Let's think.
don't think that anyone there's the amount of people that are looking at your Instagram and saying, "Man, I wish I was at that abandoned hospital right now," is I think a percentage of a percentage.
Yeah,
So I don't think you gotta
I wish I was
worry so
making
much.
monkey brain soup.
Yeah. There's people, there's Instagrams that I look at and I'm like, that is amazing and fascinating, and it scares me as well. And
Okay.
there are definitely parts of your Instagram that scare me.
I'm I'm sorry to hear that. I don't. I try not to make it scary, though.
No,
I have.
this is my own personal fears. You humanize it in a way. You do make it less scary. But my son needs help on a Paper Mario level.
Oh, okay.
He's coming in for the kill.
Yeah,
that takes precedent. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to help him out there.
I know. We're
Yes.
almost done here. It'll be okay.
Um, I forgot where I was going with all of this, but yeah, the running joke is that like whenever I say something in a podcast and I can't remember like the specific details, I always would say like you can check my Instagram, and then it spun out of control where I would just like constantly keep plugging my Instagram. So I just made a conscious effort not to mention it, but like there I did it intentionally now. Um, but
You waited till the very end. That's good. That's perfect.
yeah,
Excellent
okay.
self-control, Nemanja.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's as best as I could do it. I don't know what else to add to the whole subject of being an adult, a normal adult, a super adult human, actually, adult human. I was actually when Charlie first told me about coming on your podcast, I was not apprehensive, but I was. Well, I'll be honest. I was slightly scared about like I'm not a normal adult person. I can't talk about normal adult stuff. Like I can.
Well, this is
Um,
the thing about being a normal adult. There is no such thing as a normal adult. This is what we learn
yeah,
the more we talk to each other.
I mean that's what I kind of realize now. But at the same time, like I was thinking, for instance, a person of one of the other podcasts asked me, "What would you advise younger people today?" And my advice was, "Don't listen to a thing I say. Please don't do anything I do. Just look what I do and do the opposite." So that would be my advice for everybody else. And then she asked me, "What would I advise my younger self?" And I said I wouldn't advise him a damn thing. And she says, "So you're proud of the way you turned out?" I said, "No, I wouldn't even speak to that that degenerate of a child who just slapped him across the face and turned my that."
Well, it's
Uh,
nice. It's nice to have things be open-ended and not to model your own, like at that age when you're impressionable, to not have the desire to like model yourself after someone can be pretty liberating, I think.
Well put. Well
Some
put.
people never get over that and they're like try to be a certain type of way, forever, which can be exhausting,
And
I'm sure.
do you
well,
think
people
that can?
never had that rebirth, right?
Yeah, they
Like,
never literally died and came back to life. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen.
this has been Zombie Adult Human with
This
our
has
I
been
guest.
don't die anymore. I've done my share of dying. Please, I have only. This cat has only 3 lives left.
this cool cat.
I have one piece of advice. If anybody need that, I'm not at liberty to give, but I want to give
Please.
something that did help me a lot with a lot of my fears, phobia, social anxiety, sense of self-worth and self-respect was actually getting introduced to combat sports. And I think sports in general, but combat sports really helped me have a better sense of worth. Let me say it that way. Like you won't become a better person by knowing how to fight, but being able to fight just gives you a lot of more breathing room to find yourself.
I would
It
argue that it absolutely does make you a better person through humbling you.
Oh yes, that's very good. That's a very, very good point. There's nothing more humbling when you think you're like the shit, and then somebody who's smaller than you, who's maybe ranked lower than you, trains less than you, and then he catches you in something and drops you or chokes you out, and you're like, I wasted 10 years of my life training this thing, and this guy just like took me out. But it's a bad day, you know. It was a bad day for me, a good day for him. He took me out, you know. And then the next day, the scenario flips. I get somebody who's ranked above me, proverbially, and then what happens? And you constantly have that. You have an ego. You have an ego. You know you can win, but you're also very well aware that anybody can turn your lights off, and that's a very liberating thing. And if I would to give any sense of advice, and I don't want to give people advice, I actually abstain from that. But if I was to give anybody advice, it was consider combat sports in a healthy environment, in a good gym. Don't go to any McDojos where they that's basically a puppy mill for.
You don't think like your local bar is probably not the best place? You don't think?
Well, the difference between violence and organized violence is huge, but like from my own point of view, I get very little to no satisfaction at the notion of beating up a defenseless person.
Yeah.
But if it's a closely contested fight and I win, oh, that's just like climbing a mountain, you know. But if somebody like curls up and I'm like, come on, defend yourself, you know, like do something. Like that does nothing. It doesn't burn a fire within you. So that's also a good thing. Most people think that combat athletes are violent. They're not, because if it's something we do in a controlled environment, and then we do it against people who are at the same level or close to it. But to be violent toward a person who is way out of that sphere is basically just pure violence. And I abhor violence. I don't think that it should be ever in a public sphere. There's a reason why we have clubs for that. There's a reason why you have a place where you can go and express yourself in this quote unquote violent manner. And the bars in the streets are not that, in my own opinion. But it does build a lot of character, in my opinion.
Okay, so we'll close it out there. Kids, don't get into street fights. Don't get into bar fights. Go to your nearest high quality martial arts gym and start working your way up the pecking order.
That's right.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us, Nemanja.
Nemanja, thank you for doing this, dude. It was a pleasure, and I learned a lot about you that I didn't know.
This is the best podcast I've ever been in, even though I was the one who was talking most of the time, which I kind of hate. But this
how do we measure up to Serbian national television?
Oh my God, you do not want to know how bad Serbian national television is. Believe you me, that can be a podcast in its own.
All right, we'll do that. We'll do that one next time.
The sequel.
Your National Geographic level in comparison to Serbian national television.
Cool. Well, we'll
heard it here first, folks.
That's great.
All right, Nemanja. You have a good night.
Thanks again, Nemanja.
Have a good afternoon, you guys.
All right.
Yeah. Catch you next time. Have a
See
good
ya.
one.